around 24, I got into cocaine. And that was my drug of choice. I could drink more, be a wide awake drunk, and then I started dealing it to support my habit. So that put me down a whole different road, and then I got 8 or 9 years of not having an income on my Social Security, which affects me now. Could have a lot more. But got picked up on a DUI and got a jail date, and I didn't go do it. And so they picked me up a couple months later, and I had to do my time and go in front of the judge. The first time they gave me 30 days or 100 or a year, all suspended except for 30 days. Well, the second time, he dropped a hammer on me and said, 1 year in jail. I went, oh. So I accepted it. And I started doing my time, and somebody said, request North End Rehabilitation Center. It's jail, but it doesn't have no walls. It's an old Army barracks. And so we get sent downtown to do detox, work with detox patients and clean the detox hospital. And so I got in jail, I got in treatment. I signed up for treatment when I first got there. I was in and out of jail in 120 days. Out of the year, got released. I went, wow, this is really cool, you know? And then I looked up an old girlfriend, and she had some coke and help yourself. So she's taking a shower. I helped myself. She gave me 35 bucks when I left. I went, well, that was pretty cool. Walking distance home. And the second weekend, I looked up my old dealing buddy. He didn't want me with him because he knew I didn't need to be around him. But I finally convinced him that I did, you know. Of course, he put this big rock in front of me. And I, you know, took a toke of the whole big rock, and it messed up my stomach and my head. And I go, God, if I felt this way the whole time I used cocaine, I never want to feel this way again. And I surrendered to drugs and alcohol, December 9th, 1988. And from then on, and doing my 2-year deferred for my DUI. I had to do 4 meetings a week, and I did 10. And my probation officer said, God, I wish I had more people like you. In my last month of probation, she goes, I'm so disappointed in you. And I go, why? She goes, because you relapsed again. And I go, no, I didn't. She goes, well, Eastside said you did. And I said, no, there's another guy named Fred, Buche, without the R. So he called him up, and it was that guy. She goes, oh, I'm so relieved, you know? And I said, yeah, well, me too. Yep. So I did my 2-year deferred. By that time, I was so well into AA, greeting people as they come to the door, speaking in front of people, telling my story. And then I met my wife. Her ex-husband was taking me to meetings. And he goes, you're on your own this weekend because I have a date. And I go, oh, bummer. He goes, well, there's always Margie. And I go, oh, yeah, Margie. We can go to clean and sober dances. And we did. And anyway, we've been married 23 years now. Wow. And that's pretty much my story. Except for I had 7 years when we moved back to Montana from Seattle. And I've accumulated most of my time here. Yep. First day in was a Friday, and I went to Mills Auto, get a ball joint done. And this guy was talking about San Diego. I go, were you just at the World Convention? Or I asked him if he was a friend of Bill and Bob's. He goes, yeah, I just got back from San Diego World Convention. I go, oh, cool, I was at the Seattle World Convention. Oh, that was something else in the kingdom. That many alcoholics all over the world. In a panoramic view, I know exactly where I was because me and my wife were wearing the same shirt. And man, to see that many alcoholics in one place was pretty good. And then he told me about a Manhattan meeting on Sunday night. So I was at a meeting 2 days after I got here.
Wow. So what is your upbringing life like? Because I know a lot of what we talked about yesterday, you can probably relate with what Fred walked through as well.
Well, I'm a little bit younger than Fred.
Yeah.
I was raised in a very strong Christian home. My dad's is still a pastor, and I didn't even tell you this yesterday, but for the first 5 years of my life, I basically lived 5 different places, 5 different states, because we moved around a lot. And so when I was 6 years old, right after my 6th birthday, we moved from upstate New York back down to where my parents grew up, and I was born in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And it was there, we spent 8 years there, and I got saved there. And I remember to this day, 7 years old, sitting in the gym because we'd outgrown the auditorium that the church had this gym. And I remember getting saved. And I really latched on to growing as a Christ follower during that time. And I could tell you all the Bible facts. I just was I going?
Something's wrong with it.
There we go.
Oh, it wasn't on.
Oh, it wasn't on.
You got to flip the button.
I should have checked that. I mean, I have to do this all
And
the
he's the
time.
pastor at Tech over at Journey.
Yeah, so I know how microphones work. I was wondering, wow, someone's got the mix really quiet. And so I was a good kid, and I was really growing in my walk with Christ, even as a 8, 9-year-old, and was going along pretty good. But then there's changes that occur in a guy's body not long after that, and so puberty really distracted me, and girls and stuff like that. And so I kind of let all of my I just kind of became a normal kid and wasn't pursuing God like I had been. But going on, I wasn't a bad kid. I was a skater, but not the worst. But we was just going through life, and then we moved at the end of my 8th grade year. And this is where this has a point, I promise. So with being a preacher's kid, Southern Baptist preacher's kid, no alcohol ever in our house at all. It was never around alcohol, anything. But so we moved. Lived there 8 years, all my childhood friends and everything, and so we moved to Houston, Texas, and I was kind of upset. It kind of hurt, but you're now in 9th grade, going to a giant new school, and everything's big and different, and I kind of got settled in pretty good. Okay, well, all of a sudden we move again at the end of my 9th grade year, and this was getting old. Of giving up friends, of getting settled in, and doing this, and it really kind of sent me into a tailspin. And so we moved to Memphis, which you've ever been to Memphis, it's just not a good place. It's just not. But so we moved to Memphis, and I'm kind of depressed. I had a lot of pain, a lot of anger about having to move because your dad's a pastor, and God called him to another church. So who's to blame here? You want to kind of blame him and God for this stuff. And so I was just kind of getting an attitude about how much I really cared in general. And so I was looking for something to relieve the pain, and I found it. And I found it in a lot of different chemicals. And just but the thing about most drugs and alcohol that you guys know is that if you're depressed and you're drinking heavily, that doesn't relieve your depression, right? It just makes it worse. It doesn't feel like it's at the time because it feels like you're relieving the pain. You're numb, and it feels great. But I just kept spiraling more and more and more into my depression, and became suicidal, and finally ended up in a psychiatric hospital in 10th grade, and for being suicidal. And took a lot longer in the program than it was supposed to. I was in there over 90 days because it took me a couple of months to kind of figure out that I had to change. I didn't want to change. None of us want to change. We want to inflict change on others, but we don't like to change ourselves, right? And so it came to where I remember the point where I was sitting at the little desk. I had they gave me a Bible and sitting there, and I had to choose if I wanted to live or not. What did I want? Because I knew I really wanted to smoke a cigarette and go get a drink. But I was locked up, of course, but I couldn't. But I was like, okay, but the realization hit me that there's life and there's death. And I can choose those. I can choose life or death. And I knew that if I were to get out, even though I hadn't done anything in 2 months or whatever, if I could get out and I would go back to the way I was, I wouldn't live long. I would kill myself. And so when that reality, and that's something, the reality of that is that you can't run from that. And you're faced with this, okay, do I want to live live? And here's what it's going to take to live. Or do I want to die? So what am I going to do? And so I chose life. And the passages of Scripture talk about life. Jesus came that you might have life and have it abundantly and stuff like that. It became very important to me. Now, I wish the story just kind of was rosy from there. I mean, and it is. I had lots of good things happen. Not long after I got out, I was really growing again. I felt God calling me to ministry. I was in Missoula, Montana when that happened on a missions trip, and kind of knew that God wanted me in this area. And so began preparing for ministry, went to ministry, did lots of different ministry things. I've been in ministry since I was 17, from student ministry, street ministry, small groups pastor, country pastor, church planter, doing all these things. We move, that goes forward. We have some kids and stuff, and we moved to Montana. And during all that time, I never had anything to drink because you're in a culture that you don't do that. Montana's different, if you haven't noticed. And it's kind of a thing that's it's kind of almost expected. You're a guy, we're gonna sit with the guys, we're gonna have some beer, right? I mean, that's Montana culture, and there's nothing wrong with that. And things went fine for a long time. I started drinking socially and just to be one of the guys. I learned to like beer. I never really liked beer before, and life was good. The church plant I was a part of that I started here in Bozeman, did that for 6 years, struggled. 1 foot in front of the other every day, and we had 50 to 80 people is all we had. So just putting that 1 foot in front of the other, struggling with that, and working at MSU to pay the bills. And I've got 4 kids now, and all this was going on. And journey starts, and I'm still working at MSU, and I got this job. I just told Troy over there that I hate talking on the telephone because I spent 2.5 years in the basement of Brittany Library at MSU doing IT support over the phone, 80 calls or so a day. I hate telephones. I hate talking on the phone. But then, so I needed a better job, so I got this other job. I went from that to being assistant director of the Alumni Association. Now, what do you think of alumni associations? What do they do?
Network. Wing.
I jokingly say my job description is to drink and spam, because I would send out all the emails and stuff like that, all IT and data stuff. But still, I was fine. I would show up for the events, socially acceptable drinking and stuff like that. Did that for 4 years. But depression is starting to creep in. I didn't know at the end, but I could see it. Then I took another job in the same building. I was director of information systems for the MSU Foundation. I was tasked as part of the job with doing a system migration from an old legacy system to a brand new system. And the part of the contract with the software vendor was we had to hire 5 additional staff, and it would take 24 to 36 months. And this has a point. Well, once we got into it, they decided not to hire the staff, and they wanted it done in 18 months. Okay, so that left me and 2 other people to do this stuff in addition to all of other stuff. And MSU was growing by leaps and bounds. This is where we were going into the stadium project and all this other stuff. So things are ramping up big time. And so I'm working 80, 90 hours a week. And Doug remembers me then. That's when I started hanging out with Doug's son. It was hard. Life was hard. And so you're to the grindstone like that, and you're dissatisfied. You're getting angry. That's what happened to me. I was angry. I was having to work so much. I was, I'd get home, eat dinner with the kids. I made sure I was home for dinner with the kids, eat dinner with the kids. And then I would just sit with my laptop and a bunch of beer and just drink and do work, write SQL queries, But it's so slowly spiraling into this depression and trying to self-medicate this anger and this pain that I'm feeling, the disappointments. And, by this time I'm in the 30s or so, and, life's not really turned out exactly how I thought it was going to. It took different directions and stuff. And so to do that for 4 years, then, and I was a super volunteer at Journey during this time, doing all kinds of stuff, leading the setup team, the tech team, and doing all that stuff. And eventually, Brian Hopkins says, Sam, your day job's getting in the way of what I need you to do at Journey. And so I came on staff at Journey as one of the pastors. And thinking that would relieve everything, right? Not quite. That depression spiral continued. I just wasn't alone then in my depression spiral. And the drinking kept getting worse and worse and worse. And, I showed for, it wasn't like I was drinking at work or, that'd be funny. But
church drinking at work.
Yeah, we're doing, I was doing my job. I was doing things, but I was getting angry. I kept getting angrier and angrier. And I've discovered since then, because I watch it in other people, I do a lot of the pastoral counseling at Journey. And that depression and anger tend to go hand in hand. And I was getting angry, and I was just pissy with everybody around me. And I didn't know why. Anything would set me off. And of course, I was still drinking it. I'd go home, eat dinner with family, and then sit there and start watching TV or working still, drinking some beer. And I never got a DUI or anything like that by the grace of God. I could have a few times, but it was more what was going on with me. And I was I was substituting what God wanted to do in my life with alcohol. I was self-medicating. It was like in Troy and I just talked about having an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. Where it's becoming more important than anything. And people were telling me, you might be drinking too much. Lots of people. I think you may be drinking too much. Because I smelled like a drunk all the time. I was drinking every night, a lot. I call it was a lot. But so it kind of came to this head where I'm back, where I'm kind of suicidal. I'm thinking about death a lot. Here I'm supposed to be the face of what a good Christian is supposed to be, and full of joy and peace. And I told myself I still had those, but I'm still in this hole, deep in this hole. So I finally said, well, I can't. This has got to stop. So I went to a therapist, and I wish I could say went to a therapist a couple of times, and bam, it was awesome. No, it took me about 3 years to climb out of that hole. And struggles with alcohol, wanting to self-medicate and self-medicating and going round and round and not realizing how much damage I'd done to my family during all that time. And trying to cope with that. And get to where, okay, I realized that I have to be very, very careful with alcohol. That, yes, I still drink every once in a while. One, maybe two. But I have to watch myself. I have to have people hold me accountable to what I'm doing. Because I like it a lot. And so I have to watch myself from going down that hole. And I think that's where I see a lot of guys in Montana play with the hole. They're on the edge of the hole. And covering up some stuff with some alcohol and stuff like that. And so kind of my warning right here is just be careful, because I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that you hit on there was just the accountability aspect. And I know, Fred, you went through the AA aspect, so you had people alongside of you that if you fell, they were still there they held you accountable. They didn't gloss over it and say, pat you on the back and just move on. But
if I would have relapsed, they would have been at my door taking me to a meeting.
right. So, and the same thing with you, and I think that's part of my story as well, is I had these people that were willing to hold me accountable and say, hey, that's not who you are professing to be. And that's such a big part of it, because that's the thing that I ran from during my time of drinking. It's like, I don't want anyone telling me what to do at all.
Accountability only works as much as you're willing to be honest and engage in it.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to fake it.
Yeah.
With accountability, but it's up to your own integrity and honesty. That's how well it works.
That was one of the things that you said yesterday too when we were meeting, is just the power of not just in those accountability circles, but when you start talking about it and it's out in the light, just how much more power that gives you to start overcoming those sorts of things. And I would imagine it was the same type of deal in AA. You started to acknowledge that these were things that you were dealing with, but now that they were out there, you actually knew what you were fighting, and you had people fighting with you and for you. Is that accurate, would you say, Fred?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty accurate. And then, being a newcomer when I first got there, and then accumulating years, I had a lot of people behind me looking up to me. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to, let them down, let alone let myself down.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was this old guy he was from Butte, Montana. He had a 45-year chip. Passed it around the room. And I got a hold of that chip, and I want this chip. And I had less than a year. And I got 30 years today, and I only got 15 more to go. I'll get that chip. Hopefully that's not the only thing that told me still keeping me sober.
Yeah. So Sam, I think it's it was with myself as well, but what has life been like after accepting Jesus and kind of confronting those demons, if you will? Because it doesn't sound like it got easier for you.
No, it kind of like the accountability thing. Your spiritual life, your walk with Christ is, again, you're either gaining altitude or losing altitude. You're headed into the darkness or towards the light. Like what the email said this week, you're headed one way or the other. You don't just coast. And a lot of times we want to come in, we want to treat our walk with God as kind of we want to come in on Sunday and we punch our God card, right? We did our thing, we pleased everybody, gives us a little bit of boost in our spiritual life, and then we're going to go back to life again on Monday and do what we want to do, instead of walking in it and letting the walking towards the light and working towards that light and the life throughout the week. We want to kind of do just enough to keep our heads above water spiritually.
What are some of the steps that you take in a day-to-day to make sure you continue to pursue the light and the life that you talk to and the life that Jesus gives us?
And that's what the bad thing is that those steps are really simple, and we know them. Spending a little bit, spending 10 minutes praying and reading your Bible. 10 minutes. 10 minutes, guys. That's not hard. To read a chapter of the Bible and a few minutes praying, meditating on it. And that's what I tell people all the time. If I can get you to do 10 minutes a day, you will be amazed at how much you can grow and how much you can that can affect your life. Forgiveness. I think forgiveness is one of the biggest things, and AA teaches that too. That resentment is what will kill you, and it will kill you. I figured out that I was angry because I had all these resentment and bitterness built up in my life over stupid stuff that nobody cared about, and I didn't remember what there was, and so I had to go through it. And I think it's a 4 steps. You make your list of everybody that's wronged you, and you forgive them. And I have to do that continually to keep the anger from building up, because it builds up. I counsel men who come in, their wives drag them in, and says he's mean to me all the time. He used to be great, and he says, I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting here. And I was like, yeah, you're just sitting there and you're pissy and you're mean to everybody around you. He said, because you're pissed at everybody, pissed at people like that from going on. I told a guy one time, I said, I want you to think of somebody who you know wronged you, did you wrong. And he said, okay. And I said, okay, you think you've forgiven him? Oh yeah, I've forgiven him. I said, okay, if he walks through the door, how do you feel in your gut? Oh, you can almost see him physically tighten up. And I said, yeah, no, you haven't forgiven him yet. If that's how you feel when you think about him walking through the door. And we have anger at all these things, and we need to just let it go. We need to forgive people and say, yeah, that was wrong. That sucks. That guy didn't treat me right. And it's not right. But okay, but let it go, because you're not helping yourself by holding on to it. And then choosing not to get angry, because it's not worth it. I'm a guy. I have about this much emotional energy, and when I blow it all in a temper tantrum, I'm miserable then. Because I want to talk to you about it. I want to treat my wife and family good, right, guys? Right? Because usually it's stupid stuff that a coworker says. Even I experienced that. I won't tell you who does it the most, but
That's probably good.
Yeah. I'll keep that one quiet. But it's traffic. Why would you ever get angry at traffic, especially in Bozeman? Now, I know the Californians drive a little bit like idiots. We know that. I'm just picking on Bill. But I lived in Memphis and Houston. That's traffic. But still, it's not worth it. It's not worth it to ruin your day over stupid things. Because your kids are going to get at you later and really have something to be angry about. But still, even then, not blowing up. Choosing not to get angry. I'm not talking about stuffing your anger, but choosing not to get angry. Saying it's not worth it.
You touched on the forgiveness part of it, and Fred kind of alluded to you, and we touched about it a little bit yesterday, but has it been difficult for you guys to forgive yourselves for the choices that you made growing up with the alcohol and the drugs and those sorts of deals? Because I know I really struggled with that. How do I forgive myself for those sorts of choices?
Well, for me, I think it was easy to forgive myself just because I knew forgiving is growing. And without forgiving, you can't grow.
Yeah.
So if you're forgiving yourself or somebody else has done you wrong, or people that treat you wrong, you just don't associate with them because they haven't forgave themselves. And they're actually people that badmouth you or whatever are the people that are insecure about themselves. Not so much that you are their vocal point, but it's them hiding behind their own feelings.
Yep.
Yeah, I would say the hardest, what I've had myself, there's some regrets that are deep in me, especially around my family. And all the time I lost with them in the critical times of their lives. During middle school and high school was when I was in this hole and creating damage to them, not being the dad I should have been. That's hard.
Yeah.
That's really hard. So guys with young kids, keep it together. Take the right path, because you will long for those days again. And I ask God every day to redeem those years for me.
Yeah, and I would say as well, take the time around the tables too to look at these men beside you, because they can be the ones that are holding you accountable right now, so you don't have to go through stuff like that. There's just such value bringing those things to light before we get down that path where those regrets just become a saddled part of who we are, it's huge. So we're going to kick it back to the tables and just hopefully facilitate some discussion around that.
You know, in that secrecy, the lack of integrity that creates, and that's part of what keeps it a hold of you. You can't let anybody find out. You want to do this, you know, but because it makes you feel better and all this stuff like that. But it's in the secrecy and bringing it to light and having a few people that you can say, hey, look, I think I drink too much. And I was going to say, I told Dan yesterday, if someone says to you, I think you might be drinking too much, or do you think you drink too much? That's what Derry Long asked me. Do you think you drink too much? I was like, I don't know. If someone says that to you, you should take them seriously, because you probably have an unhealthy relationship, and be looking at that and asking yourself, why am I doing this? Why? Because, you know, normal people, healthy people, do not need to self-medicate. It's when there's something wrong, something lacking, that is when we need to do that. And a lot of times, a lot of guys who don't drink, they're self-medicating in other things, and covering up other weaknesses with it. So, I mean, anything, sex, sports. Someone whose their whole focus is on one football team, and their whole life is lived around the Bears or whoever. Or I didn't hear you changing. But you know, that's, you know, what are you focused on? What can you not do without? And that's you're substituting for something. And so let's get into the story I was going to talk about. Other finger. This is from Deuteronomy 30, and the setting of this is they're right at Israel. Moses has led Israel for 40 years. They're right on they're on the Jordan River, and they're getting ready to pass over into the Promised Land. Moses is about to die. This is his final. This is a review of what they need to do. That they need to keep the law. That they need to not worship other gods. That they need to do right. And so he says, for this commandment that I command you today is not too hard for you, neither is it far off. It's not in heaven that you should say, who will ascend to heaven and bring us and bring it to us, that we may hear and do it. Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who will go over the sea for us and bring it to us, that we may hear and do it. But the word is very near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart, so that you can do it. See, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I command you today, by loving the Lord your God, by walking in his ways, and by keeping his commandments and his statutes and his rules, then you shall live. I'm skipping a couple of verses. But if your heart turns away and you will not hear, but are drawn away to worship other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall surely perish. Now, one of the things that as I'm studying at Western Seminary, just like Dan is, but he's a year ahead of me. And so one of the things that kind of really came to light this last semester, that you have those things you kind of know, but then they really come into full bloom, is we think of the law as the bunch of what we consider the Bible, the law, the Mosaic law, as a bunch of really freaky rules and regulations and stuff that we shouldn't do. But what I never thought about it before is that it never talks about that. That's how you get to heaven. It never says you do these things. This is how you get to heaven. The whole point of the law was so that people could dwell in God's presence, because that's what God wanted more than anything. If you look at when Adam and Eve, they fell, they sinned, and they were cast out of the garden. God mourned that he couldn't spend time with them. And when he And the rest of the story is about God making a way for us to be in his presence. Because that's what he wanted more than anything. He builds and that's what the garden represented. The garden was man and God co-ruling the earth as partners in the garden. That God tells Adam and Eve, I want to make you rulers with me. We're going to rule the earth and have dominion over it all. And so when we built the tabernacle, as Moses builds the tabernacle and the temple and all this, it's all this garden imagery and stuff like that to go back to that point, because God wants us in that life, in the light, in there, because that's where he wants us in his presence. And so when you think about what it is to walk with Christ, it's to head into the light. It's to head into the garden, to be in God's presence. Because that's where you grow spiritually. That's what I'm saying. Spend 10 minutes a day reading the Bible, praying, learning to hear God, to hear and respond to God. Because that's where the life is. That's where the health is. Because otherwise, you're just stumbling in the dark, trying to figure it out. Now, we all have struggles. We all have stuff. I have a chemical imbalance in my brain for depression. It's there. I have to take antidepressants. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of times, guys, we have problems with, saying I'm depressed. Well, it is what it is. We wouldn't think about it if I was born without a leg, But it is what it is. We have fallen bodies, we're there. And so never be ashamed of admitting when you have a problem with something, no matter what it is. But head towards the light, into the where there's life. You're always gaining altitude or losing altitude spiritually. Head one way or the other. There's no just hanging out. And so as you have a choice to make every day. What am I, life or death, light or darkness? Where am I headed today? What am I going to do to move towards one or the other? Because you're choosing one or the other every day and with every action. And I was telling them with the drinking, stuff like that, we tell ourselves so many lies about when we want to just do what we want to do. You know what I'm talking about? I can justify anything that I want to do. And so I was just saying, because I have some anxiety stuff too that I discovered through all this stuff. And, coming here tonight, I was getting ready. I ran by the house to pick up my iPad and some stuff like that. And I was like, a little nervous about tonight. I was like, wow, a beer would just take that edge right off. No, I did not. But, we tell their lies and say, oh, that would just make it better. You start thinking that way. That's not healthy. And that's where you think, oh, I may need to cut back. I may need to take 90 days off from drinking any alcohol or whatever. To let that stronghold go and talk to somebody about it. I think I'm going to take a break from alcohol for 90 days just to make sure I don't have a problem. That's healthy. That's real. That's like mature thinking there. They're saying, no, I don't have a problem. And then until it's too late and you've missed a lot of life. You've caused a lot of damage because of your own fascination with death or darkness. That's not where you want to be. You want to be in the light. Everything's better there. And you want life. Because Jesus said, I came that you might have life and have it abundantly. And that's where you want to be. You want that full life, that abundant life. You want that joy and peace that comes with living in God's presence, of walking with him in the light. Because that's where you're meant to be. That's where we were created to be. Is in the light, not in the darkness. We are never supposed to experience death. So let's pursue that over anything else, over our own self-comfort, for pursuing God in his presence. Thanks, guys.